Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to continue with the wall jump. We're going to be finishing this animation. We're going to prepare for render. So let's go. We're going to get rid of the motion trail. We don't need it anymore. We can of course press Alt 1 to make sure that the curves are hidden. And if we play, we can now see how our animation looks. Very nice, very good for this simple exercise that's teaching us the basics of animation. So I'm not sure if we've already talked about all the principles of animation, like in order. So let me just bring them out. Principles of animation here. As I've mentioned in the history video, there's 12 principles of animation that relate to all of the things that we normally do here inside of animation. There's this video right here, I strongly recommend it. It's by a guy named, what's his name? Alan Becker. It's a 24-minute video where he explains all of the elements. Very cool. But if we just take a look at the actual principles, you can see we have a squash and stretch. We've used it in this exercise. We have anticipation. We've used it. We have a staging. Haven't talked about that one. We have straight ahead action and pose to pose. Those are two methods. We've used pose to pose in this case. We have follow through and overlap with the tail. We have slow in and slow out. We have the arcs, the secondary action, timing, exaggeration. We don't have solid drawing. In our case, I would call it solid 3D, where we want everything to be looking nice. And finally, appeal. Appeal is just like the charm, like the charisma of the character. So the one that we haven't talked about and we're going to be taking a look at right now is staging. And staging has to do with how we present the animation. So I'm going to go here into rendering. I'm going to create a new camera. I'm going to say panels, look through selected, and I'm just going to frame my character right here. So if I were to frame this, I need to understand what is it that I want to show. Do I want to show the challenge that this guy is gonna approach right here? Do I want to show the whole thing, like the animation process? Do I want to show the result, like maybe he's coming from this angle? So there's pretty much an infinite amount of angles through which we can show our animation. However, some of the angles are going to be way better than others. For instance, an angle like this one, it's actually really cool. But maybe we want to have a little bit of a closer look with the character and kind of follow him throughout his action, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to press Alt 1 to see all the curves, and I'm going to say select all by type, nurse curves. And I'm going to give myself a little bit more time, and I'm going to move all of the keyframes, let's say like 2 seconds, 30 or 60 frames to the front. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a little bit of a push in with the camera. So I'm going to start with my camera right here. I'm going to select my camera, and on frame 1, I'm going to hit S. And then I'm going to have 60 frames to push the camera into a situation where I feel like it looks nice. It's framing everything nicely, and we can see the whole action, which is something like this. Then, as the animation starts to unfold, I want the camera to be like panning out and probably zooming out a little bit so that we always catch all of the animation. See there? So I definitely need to probably push my camera out a little bit more. So do something like this so that we prepare at the same time as the character. And then we just see the jump. As you can see here, I probably would need this to be slightly lower so that we always see the whole animation. There we go. He does the backflip, and there we go. And then finally, let's say from this point, like to a frame 130, we can do a little bit of a close-up, right? To indicate that the character finished his whole animation. So now if we hit play, we're gonna get this very nice animation. Now the only issue with this, as you can see, is the camera movement's a little bit too wild. So we go from here and then through here, and we kind of lose track of our little guy right here. So let's start adding a couple of extra frames here. And softening out the movement. I do want to have this like frame out. Maybe like even like move this guy further back so that the movement's a little bit slower. And we can see the whole preparation. The jump. I really want to see the jump a little bit more clearer like this. We follow the backflip, and then we fall, and we get this close-up. See that? So this is just a very basic camera animation that we can add to our scene, and it's gonna give us a little bit more of an interesting look. I still think it's a little bit too intense. So let's say we don't want this extreme animation. If you want to render this, then you're free to do so, of course. But I'm gonna go for something a little bit lighter. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select my camera again, delete all of these frames. So delete. And I want my final frame to be kind of like a close-up right here. Something like this. Kind of like on one of the thirds of the image. but I want this, as you can see, it's pushing in too fast, and I don't want this push in to be as fast. So I'm probably gonna go to frame like 80, and I'm gonna keep the camera out so that the push is a little bit smoother. So we see this. I still don't love it, that the fact that it's doing this, so let's always keep the action framed. There we go. So we keep the action framed, the little fox does this jump. I'll probably change this to something like this, because I don't want to really see the overlap on the element. So yeah, I like this, like a small twist. The fox jumps, he does the backflip. Very important that here we kind of frame everything so that when we see the backflip, we see all of the action. And now we do the zoom in. Now we need to check how this looks in the speed, because sometimes, even though on the scrub it might look nice, the speed might be a little bit too fast. But in this case, no, it looks pretty good. So 140 frames is roughly what we're gonna be animating, and we get this very nice effect. Ding. So yeah, you can add like a little text message at the end, like we did it or something, but this is just a simple exercise, just to show you a little bit of camera movement and of course the animation of the character. Now we need to talk about the rendering settings, and this is something that we've already done with the little flower sack. And so I'm just gonna go here, lights, I'm gonna add a skylight. On our source images, we have one very nice source image, this peppermint power plant, which it's fine. It's just something that we can use. I'm gonna go here on the camera visibility, we're gonna turn this off. Let me save this in real quick. I'm gonna go Arnold and we're gonna render this in just to see how this looks. Now, since we're using Blend materials, which are like the basic materials from Maya, everything is gonna be reflective, which is perfectly fine. As you can see, this makes it look very cool. I don't wanna add one extra light, so I'm gonna go back into perspective. I'm gonna say Arnold, lights, area light, and I'm gonna position this light on top. It's gonna be a big area light right here. Let's give it a warm tone, so I'm gonna use color temperature and bring this down so it's warmer. And the exposure is gonna be something, should be something big, like 20. Let's try that first. Let's see how this looks. It's way too much, so let's go to like 15. No, I think it's a little bit too much still, so let's go 12. That's way better. See that? Very nice, like global illumination effect and everything going on. That's exactly what we're going for, and you can see our little fox character right there. Now, let's really go for like a high quality render. So I'm gonna go here into the system. I'm gonna change this to GPU. If you have a GeForce or a NVIDIA graphic card, you're gonna be able to do this. If you don't, then that's fine. It's just gonna take a little bit longer with your traditional CPU. I'm gonna enable my adaptive sampling. I'm gonna lower this to something like 10. I don't think we need more than 10. And that's gonna allow us to sample the image up to 10 times, or until we hit the threshold of 0.015 on the noise, which should give us very little noise. You can see how the noise is getting reduced there. And for an image this size, I think this is perfectly reasonable. So if we were to just like move to like the end here, and we take a look at that nice bounce light in the character, some global illumination working very nice. That's why I love Arnold. Everything is ready out of the box. So you can see the reflection there on the path, and then jumping all the way to the front. So that's it. We have everything set up here. So I'm just gonna change the name of the camera to ShotCam. I'm gonna go to my render settings, common, make sure that we're exporting to name, number, and extension. This is gonna be called wall jump animation. I don't want EXRs, let's do JPEGs. JPEGs is fine for this sort of exercises. And I want from frame 1 to frame 140. And we're gonna render, very important, make sure you render from the ShotCam. And then HD 540, it's good. If you want to do full HD, then just change that setup right there. And very important, you're going to go all the way up here to the little open render view. You're going to render sequence, but we're going to make sure that the current camera is set to ShotCam. One way I make sure of this is I go render, and just render one frame from the ShotCam. Any frame is fine, just to make sure that it's actually rendering from the ShotCam. And as soon as I see that everything is working here nicely, after that, we can just render the sequence right here. So render sequence. Now, while this is rendering, some of you have been asking, and some of my students have asked about something called batch render. So batch rendering is another option that we normally have in the 3D world, And batch rendering allows us to run a separate instance of Maya. So it's kind of like opening Maya under the hood and doing the render without affecting what we're actually working or currently working on. Batch render usually works best when you have a render farm. So if you have like more than 3, 4, 5 computers in your home and all of them have licenses for Maya and Arnold, then batch rendering might be a good option for you, because you can use all of them and render, and meanwhile you can just keep working on your main computer, right? So in my case, I only have this computer right here, so render sequence works exactly the same. You're able to export everything that you want exactly the same using render sequence. Actually, if you try to batch render using the default Arnold setup here with your student license, or even in this case with my Indie license, you are gonna get a watermark. You need to buy an Arnold license to be able to batch render. But again, batch rendering is not something you need unless you have a render farm. Render sequence works just as fine, and then you're gonna get like the whole sequence with all the quality and stuff, and you're actually gonna be seeing what's happening. With batch render, you don't see it; you just see the code running. And there's another thing called render farms. So later on, maybe at the end of the course, we'll talk a little bit about this, but render farms are services that you can actually hire to render your scene. So if at any point you're doing like some sort of commercial or work for a client and you feel like your computer is rendering too slowly and the client needs a lot of changes, render farms are actually really, really good. I'm not sure about this one. It's just the first one I clicked. There's a ton of them out there. And basically what you do is you upload your scenes, you set up the settings, and then you just render. You pretty much hire or rent a processing speed, and they will deliver you the final images so that you can keep on working and they'll do the render for you. Of course, this is expensive, not super expensive, but it does have a cost. So that's something that in my particular case, anytime I need to do something like that for a client, I always make sure to include that sort of budget on the price, right? So if I'm gonna do, I don't know, like 1,000 frames with the render farm, I'll probably increase the price just to say like a random number, maybe extra $200, right? And I know that those $200 are going to allow me to use the render farm services, and that way I can keep on working on the scene while the render farm is doing its job. It's cloud based, so you're only going to be downloading the images, and it's a nice way to get rid of all of this job. There's other ways to do it. You can of course render in engines like Unreal or Unity. You can use Marmoset. You can do GPU renders, CPU renders. Like there's a ton of different ways to do the final renders. This one that I'm showing you right here, the animation sequence, is just one of them. So that's it, guys. I'm gonna again give you a little bit of homework. If you want, try replicating this, try duplicating some of these objects and doing a different animation just to get the hang of this. I've done this a lot of times, so this comes a little bit easier for me due to the practice, but for you it's probably gonna be a little bit difficult at first. So make sure to practice, make sure you get all of these exercises from module 2 ready, and you feel comfortable moving on onto module 3, because we're now gonna be talking about characters, and it's gonna be of course a little bit more tricky. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye-bye.